an important crop in Kentucky and Missouri. In 1942, patriotic farmers at the government's request...
I'm going to try to send a letter to the president asking him to give Kentucky a waiver. We could be one of the first states to grow hemp. That'd be great.
Freedom is very popular. There is no doubt. Not only is freedom popular, is that freedom works. The bureaucracy doesn't work. The politicians can't do it. You know, they talk about energy problems. And sure, we have a problem because the government's too much involved and they impede so much of what we try to do. You take, for instance, what do? They tax us so that they can subsidize ethanol from corn. And then what do? It turns out that ethanol from sugarcane is much better, but they don't get the same benefit. But lo and behold, they have found out that the best source of ethanol is from hemp. But, you know, we're from the government and we're here to help you. So we don't want you to mess around with hemp. You might smoke that stuff. I found out that if you want to smoke and get marijuana out of hemp, you have to have a marijuana cigarette as big as a telephone pole. Then you might get something. But it's back to the saying about why do they regulate our personal habits anyway? Why don't we allow them to decide what's good for us?
Justice, it's not about agenda, it's not about mobilizing people, it's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.
The United States of America is a terrorist base of operations.
I think 3 million people voted, or 3.5 million people voted. I have to say that there was one question that was voted on that ranked fairly high. But I don't know what this says about the online audience.
Jeffrey Myron is a Harvard economics professor and a frequent guest on this program, but we've never had him on, at least as far as I can recall, to talk about drugs. Here's why we're doing this now. He's written a book where he explains what legalizing drugs would save our economy. You ready for the number? $77 billion a year. For comparison, that's the figure that Bernie Madoff admits to bilking investors out of in his Ponzi scheme, so they could be all paid back with one quick swoop. Professor Myron, thanks so much for being with us, sir.
Nice to be back here.
Break it down for us. You know, we got that figure of 77 million from you. How did you get to 77 billion?
Well, you would get about 44 billion by not spending the money we're currently spending on police for arrests, on judges and prosecutors for all the trials, for prisons and prison guards, etc., for the incarcerations. And you get another 33 or so billion by collecting tax revenue on legal drugs in the same way we collect lots of tax revenue on cigarettes and alcohol. So it's a combination of those two things, and that number puts together the state and the federal, but it gets you what used to be thought of as a big number, although these days it doesn't sound so impressive.
But I just want, I don't want people to think that this was a fairly popular question. We want to make sure that it was answered. The answer is no, I don't think that is a good strategy to grow our economy. So. But
When these ancient Grecian temples were new, hemp was already old in the service of mankind. For thousands of years even then, this plant had been grown for cordage and coarse cloth in China and elsewhere in the East. For centuries prior to about 1850, all the ships that sailed the western seas were rigged with hempen rope and sails. The Conestoga wagons and prairie schooners of pioneer days were covered with hempen canvas. Indeed, the very word canvas comes from the Arabic word for hemp. In those days, hemp was an important crop in Kentucky and Missouri. In 1942, patriotic farmers at the government's request planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand %. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp. Thus, plans are afoot for a great expansion of the hemp industry as a part of the war program. Hemp for tow line, hemp for tackle and gear, hemp for countless naval uses both on ship and shore. Hemp for victory.
The answer is no. I don't think that is a good strategy to grow our economy. So, all right.
I mean, any attempt to drive a market underground, to ban it, to prohibit it, means that it may shrink a little bit, but it's mainly just going to become an underground market. That's what we saw for alcohol in the 20s and 30s. That's what we've seen for drugs. That's what we've seen in other societies and other times for gambling, for prostitution, for all these things. And in underground markets, people resolve their disputes with violence because they can't use lawyers and courts and advertising. And so guns are the only logical alternative, and we observe that over and over again with any kind of prohibition.
Well, while you may be theoretically right, isn't there just a sort of common sense argument? Somebody could have a couple glasses of wine over dinner. You can't really be a social user of injecting heroin.
Well, the fact is that people can use many drugs, including heroin, for long periods, okay, if they have access to a legal supply that's a moderate price, if they're able to consume it in a way which is not inherently dangerous, such as injecting or sharing dirty needles. And of course, people can do horrible things with alcohol if they're going to be irresponsible. People who use tobacco in a regular way risk very serious negative consequences. For all these other dangerous things, potentially dangerous things, we keep them legal, but we tax and regulate them, and we address the irresponsible uses with things like drunk driving laws, but we keep the market above ground, which avoids all these negative things like the violence.
I mean, would you go to a doctor who said, you know, I just occasionally use heroin on the weekends? I mean, would you get a surgery from a doctor like that? Would you want your kids going to nursery school where their teachers say, you know, I do some meth and try to keep my weight down?
The fact is that we're all doing that now. We just don't know it. Okay, we are going to doctors who may be alcoholics, who may be misusing currently illegal drugs. Some of the teachers of our kids are doing all those things on the weekends, but it's just been pushed underground. So by bringing it above ground, we're more likely to know about it. We're more likely to be able to use things like drug testing procedures to address the irresponsible uses of drugs on or off the job. Pretending that we're getting rid of it with prohibition is clearly not changing the fact. We know that millions and millions of people are doing these things every day, but we're pretending that it's not there. It's already a problem.
I know that, you know, the article that you wrote, and it was very thoughtful. I'm playing devil's advocate here with you, but how do we find a way to tax or get income off of what's still going to be illegal, right, internationally? I mean, if people are bringing drugs over here illegally, even though we may say they're legal here, how do we control all of that traffic? How do we control all of that revenue that's coming in and find a way to tax it and have it work?
Well, if we were to actually legalize it, I have no doubt that most of the rest of the world would immediately legalize as well. The U.S. historically has been the biggest advocate of prohibition. We, in fact, forced it on the rest of the world in 1919 as a condition of signing the treaty that ended World War I. I'm sure that lots of Latin American governments would be delighted to legalize because a huge amount of the corruption and violence in their countries is due to U.S. pressure to maintain this policy.
The answer is no. I don't think that is a good strategy to grow our economy. So, all right. Wall Street over Main Street.
The economy is doing badly right now. Companies are collapsing, and we don't know when everything's going to recover. But you know what could help? How about the biggest cash crop in the United States? You probably think it's corn, and why not? It isn't everything. But you'd be wrong. And it's not wheat either. It's actually bigger than corn and wheat combined. It's marijuana. With an estimated take of $35 billion a year, marijuana is by far the largest.
I just don't know, you know, which candidate would be the best for me to smoke weed in my minivan.
How much of that money is growing our economy? Not much. Well, unless some guys at Stanford smoke up one night and think of the greatest search engine ever invented. Not that I'm implying anything. This $35 billion crop, and again, that's just in the United States, isn't taxed, regulated, or employs anyone in a legal market. Imagine what kind of money, both in sales and taxes, could be collected from it if it were legalized. And years of scientific evidence, much of it from the United States government, proclaims that pot is safer than alcohol and should be made legal.
This is not the time to be complacent!
So, the only question is, why hasn't it been? After all, our economy's counting on it.
The answer is no. I don't think that is a good strategy to grow our economy. So, all right.
It's not about agenda. It's not about mobilizing people. It's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.
Hemp isn't just another plant. What I've said before is it's greater than all the other plants that grow on Earth combined for paper, fiber, fuel. It's the only one that grows it without pesticide or herbicide. You've got to be insane not to put this information into your children's minds.
There's only one
known renewable natural resource that is capable of providing
the overall majority of the world's paper and textiles.
Meet all the world's transportation, industrial, and home energy needs,
while simultaneously reducing pollution,
rebuilding the soil,
and cleaning the atmosphere, all at the same time.
And that substance is the same one that has done it before for 5,000 years.
Cannabis hemp, marijuana.